Here's where the story of Spartacus becomes almost impossible to believe. Not one Roman army, 11 Roman forces, sent one after another to crush the rebellion, were defeated, scattered, or humiliated by an army of escaped slaves and gladiators. Let that sink in for a moment. The most powerful military machine in the known world, with its trained legions and professional officers and centuries of battlefield experience, losing over and over again to men who had been in chains 6 months earlier. How? 3 reasons. And understanding them tells you something important about what kind of person Spartacus was. First, tactics. Spartacus had served in the Roman army. He understood how Roman forces fought, the tight formations, the coordinated legionary advances, the reliance on discipline and drill. He knew how to exploit the gaps. When Roman commanders tried the same tactics against him that worked against every other enemy, Spartacus knew those tactics from the inside and knew how to counter them. Motivation. A Roman professional soldier was well trained, but he was fighting for pay, for duty, for a commander's orders. Spartacus's fighters were fighting for something older and deeper than any of that. They were fighting for their lives and for the idea that they could be free. That kind of motivation, as any military historian will tell you, is genuinely terrifying to face on a battlefield. Third, intelligence. Spartacus was genuinely remarkably smart. The accounts we have, even from Roman historians who had every reason to belittle him, describe him consistently as a man of great strategic ability. He chose his ground carefully. He never fought the Romans on terms that favored them. He adapted constantly. After Vesuvius, Rome sent a second praetor, a man named Publius Varinius, with a larger, better-equipped force. Varinius divided his command, sending ahead his officers, Furius and Cosinius, with portions of the army. Spartacus destroyed them in detail, meaning he attacked each piece separately before they could combine. Cosinius, in one of the more embarrassing moments in Roman military history, was nearly captured by the gladiators while taking a bath. He escaped that particular indignity, but was killed shortly after. Varinius himself survived, but Spartacus took something that would have stung the praetor deeply: his horse. In Roman culture, riding a horse was a symbol of high status. Spartacus, a slave, riding the praetor's horse, was a statement. Spartacus reportedly banned gold and silver from entering the towns his forces controlled, but actively encouraged iron imports. He was deliberately transforming his army from raiders into a real military force, ensuring his blacksmiths could produce enough weapons and armor for all his new recruits. The army kept growing, 40,000, 60,000, 70,000. By now, 3 distinct strategies were being debated around Spartacus's campfires. Some of his men, probably many of them, wanted revenge. They had suffered for years under Roman whips and Roman chains. Now they had power. They wanted to march on Rome itself, sack the city, and tear down everything the Republic stood for. Crassus, the Gaul, led this faction. He was bold, aggressive, and hungry for blood. He had never been free in his memory. He did not want to run. He wanted to destroy. Others, possibly including Spartacus himself, according to at least one ancient source, had a different plan. Cross the Alps, the massive mountain range that separates modern Italy from France and Central Europe. Get out of Roman territory altogether. Let people return to their homelands, Gauls to Gaul, Thracians to Thrace, Germans to their forests. Freedom, not revenge, but survival. The sources debate this endlessly. Some say Spartacus genuinely wanted to lead everyone to freedom across the Alps. Others say he wanted to march on Rome and was simply being strategic about when. The truth is, we do not know with certainty. And this is something worth understanding about history. Sometimes the records simply do not tell us what someone was really thinking. We can only work with what we have. What we do know is that the disagreement between Spartacus and Crassus was real, and eventually it pulled the rebel army apart. In the spring of 72 BC, Crassus split off with roughly 30,000 men and began operating independently, raiding in southern Italy. Rome saw the division and acted. 2 consuls, the highest officials in the Republic, were dispatched with full legions. Lucius Gellius went after Crassus. Gnaeus Lentulus went after Spartacus. Near a place called Mount Garganus in southern Italy, Gellius caught Crassus's forces. The battle was brutal and one-sided. Crassus's men, brave but poorly coordinated against professional legions, were overwhelmed. 2/3 of them were killed. Crassus himself fell on the battlefield, fighting to the end, but defeated. When news reached Spartacus, he stopped. He held a ceremony, a strange, powerful, defiant ceremony. He ordered 300 Roman prisoners to fight each other as gladiators, not for Roman entertainment, but in honor of Crassus, a man who had died in chains and dreamed of being free. Let the Romans, for once, perform for us. Then he turned north again, and he shattered Lentulus's army. Then he turned south and shattered Gellius's army a second time. 2 consuls, the highest military commanders in the Roman Republic, both defeated in a single campaign season. By the summer of 72 BC, Spartacus commanded approximately 120,000 infantry, an unknown number of cavalry. He was no longer leading a rebellion. He was leading a war. And in Rome, for the first time, senators started to say out loud the thing they had all been trying not to think. This man might actually be able to take the city. Picture this moment. You are a wealthy Roman senator. You own a beautiful villa in Campania, the region south of Rome, famous for its warm climate and gorgeous scenery. Half of Italy's most powerful families have vacation homes there. For the last year, those estates have been burning. Your neighbors have fled. The slaves who worked your vineyards are gone, not dead, but marching with Spartacus. You look out the window of your home in Rome, and somewhere to the south, 100,000 people who were once property are camped beneath the open sky, armed and free. The Senate was panicking. They did something they had not done for either of the 2 previous slave rebellions in Sicily. They stopped sending praetors. They sent the consuls. And then the consuls lost. After that, nobody wanted the job. There was a genuine crisis of confidence. How do you recruit a commander when every recent commander who faced Spartacus has failed? The fear of losing to a slave army was humiliating enough. The fear of losing your political career or your life made capable men suddenly discover reasons to be unavailable. And then one man said yes. His name was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was, by most accounts, the single wealthiest man in the entire Roman Republic. His fortune, perhaps 200 million sesterti, or in modern terms, something in the range of $15 to $20 billion, had been assembled through an almost villainous combination of schemes. He owned a private fire brigade that would arrive at a burning building, refuse to fight the flames unless the panicking owner agreed on the spot to sell the property at a ruinous price, and then, after the deal was signed, extinguish the fire. He bought up land confiscated from political enemies. He trained unskilled slaves, increased their value, and resold them for profit. He was also genuinely brilliant, fiercely ambitious, and militarily experienced. He had served under the great general Sulla. He knew what he was doing. And critically, he had money. Enormous amounts of it. The Senate gave him command of 6 new legions, plus the battered remains of the consular armies, somewhere between 30 and 48,000 soldiers in total. Crassus used his own gold to equip, feed, and pay them. But Crassus had a problem. His soldiers were not performing. In one early engagement, his legate Mummius disobeyed direct orders, attacked Spartacus independently, and was soundly beaten. The men panicked. Standards were dropped. Soldiers fled. Crassus did something almost no Roman commander had done in 150 years. He ordered a decimation. Decimation. The word literally means removal of 1/10. The soldiers were divided into groups of 10. Each group drew lots. 1 man in every 10, the unlucky one who drew the short straw, was executed by his own comrades, in front of the whole army. Whether Crassus decimated a single disgraced cohort of 500 men, as one source says, or a larger portion of his army, as another claims, the effect was immediate and absolute. The historian Appian writes that after this, Crassus's soldiers feared their own general more than they feared Spartacus. That was exactly what Crassus intended. Now both sides had something to prove. Spartacus, still moving through southern Italy, looked at the map and made a plan. The island just off the toe of Italy had a long history of slave revolt. If he could get there, he might spark a 4th uprising, recruit thousands more, and turn a desperate final stand into a second war. He reached out to pirates, Cilician pirates from the coast of modern Turkey, who were known for hiring out ships to anyone with enough gold. The pirates agreed. He paid them, and they sailed away without him. Pirates, being pirates, had apparently found a better deal somewhere else. Stranded at the southern tip of Italy, Spartacus's options were narrowing. Crassus moved fast. He built a remarkable feat of military engineering, a wall and ditch system stretching nearly 60 kilometers across the narrow neck of the Rhegium Peninsula, the toe of the Italian boot. Rock, timber, earth, dug and built in weeks, long enough to cut off the rebel army from the rest of Italy. 70,000 men trapped between a wall and the sea. For a moment it looked like it might be over. But Spartacus did it again. On a single stormy night, he ordered his men to fill a section of the ditch with wood and soil and the bodies of dead horses and cattle, a makeshift causeway, rough and treacherous, and he marched a portion of his army across it. 1/3 of the rebel force broke through Crassus's famous wall. The war continued. But Spartacus was running out of time, and worse, news was coming from the north that would change everything. 2 more Roman armies were on the way. There are moments in history when a person looks at everything in front of them. The shrinking options, the narrowing horizon, the weight of all the people depending on them, and has to make a choice. Spartacus was standing at exactly that moment in the early months of 71 BC. On one side, Crassus, with his wall rebuilt and his army pressing forward. On the other, news from Rome. 2 other commanders were coming. Pompey the Great, one of Rome's most celebrated generals, had just finished crushing a rebellion in Spain and was marching his army south. Lucullus was coming from the east. 3 Roman armies converging. Spartacus tried the diplomatic option first. He sent emissaries to Crassus, offering to negotiate. Crassus rejected it without even considering the terms. He had one goal: total victory, with every scrap of the credit belonging to him alone. He was terrified that if he stalled, Pompey would arrive and steal the glory. He would not share this moment with anyone. And so Spartacus understood. There would be no deal, no negotiation, no escape to Sicily. The mountains were behind Crassus's wall, the sea was behind them. There was only one direction left. The rebel army marched toward Crassus, and before the final battle, Spartacus did something that ancient writers recorded with a kind of stunned admiration. He called for his horse. The animal was brought forward. Spartacus looked at it for a moment. Then he drew his sword and killed it. He turned to his men. "If we win today," he said, "we will have all the horses of the Romans to choose from. If we lose, I will not need one." It was the act of a man who had already decided how he was going to die. The final battle took place near the Cellarius River in southern Italy, the modern Sella River running through the hills above the Amalfi coast. Both sides knew what this was. Spartacus unleashed his forces with everything they had. The rebel army slammed into the Roman legions, sword against shield, spear against armor. The fighting was close, brutal, and savage. Spartacus's men had no professional drill, no centuries of formation tactics, but they had years of rage and the fighting skill of gladiators and the absolute bone-deep knowledge that this was the last battlefield they would ever stand on. The Romans had training, numbers, and discipline built by the terror of decimation. For a while it was close. Spartacus himself fought his way toward Crassus, cutting down anyone in his path. He killed 2 centurions, the officers who commanded the small units that were the backbone of the Roman legion, as he tried to reach the general directly. He never made it. Appian, the historian, writes, Spartacus was wounded by a spear thrust in the thigh, but he went down on one knee, held his shield in front of him, and fought off his attackers, until he and a great number of his followers were encircled. Down on one knee, shield raised, still fighting. He did not surrender. He was cut down where he stood. Around him, his army collapsed. 36,000 of his soldiers were killed in the battle. 6,000 survivors were taken prisoner by Crassus, and Pompey, arriving late, not having fought in the final battle, rounded up 5,000 more who had fled. Pompey then sent a letter to Rome, claiming he had destroyed the rebellion. Crassus was furious, but there was nothing he could do. And then something strange happened. Something that, in its own way, is one of the most haunting details of the entire story. They searched the battlefield for Spartacus's body. They searched everywhere. They never found it. The Romans desperately wanted to display it. A dead rebel leader's body put on public display was the standard message to anyone who might be thinking of following in his footsteps. But Spartacus's body was gone. Nobody knows what happened to it. Perhaps it was so thoroughly mixed into the carnage of the battlefield that it was simply impossible to identify. Perhaps his surviving followers recovered it and buried it secretly, the way soldiers sometimes do for a beloved commander. Perhaps the man who had spent his entire adult life defying Roman control managed, even in death, to be uncontrollable. The 6,000 prisoners, every single one of them, were crucified along the Appian Way, the great road running from Capua to Rome. Crosses for 200 kilometers, bearing the bodies of men who had once been slaves and dared to say, "We will not live like this." Their bodies were left up for years, as a warning. But here's the thing about warnings. They do not always work the way the people giving them intend. Because the story of Spartacus did not die on that battlefield. It was only beginning.